I can't believe we actually pulled it off.
Watch yourself.
40 billion. It's incredible.
The envelope in her hand was worth $40 billion, but the man who just fired her would never know. Lily Torres sat in her car in the underground parking lot, mascara running down her cheeks, staring at the email on her phone that had come through exactly 17 minutes after she'd been escorted out of the building. The subject line read, "Deal confirmed, TITANCORE acquisition approved." Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. 6 years. 6 years of her life poured into Hartley Tech Solutions, and Victor Hartley had just thrown her away like yesterday's coffee cup. Not because she'd failed. Not because she'd messed up, but because his niece needed a job, and Lily's position was the easiest sacrifice. The cruelest part, Victor had no idea what she'd been building in the shadows. No idea that the biggest tech deal in African history had her fingerprints all over it. No idea that in 3 days, when the contracts went public, his company could have been transformed into a continental powerhouse. Could have been. Past tense. Because Lily Torres was done saving men who couldn't see her value. She'd arrived at Hartley Tech on a rainy Thursday morning in 2018, fresh out of university with a degree in international business and a head full of dreams. Victor had seemed kind back then, visionary even, talking about building bridges between African tech companies and global markets. He'd hired her as his executive assistant, promising mentorship and growth. She'd believed him. God, she'd believed every word. The first year, she'd answered phones and scheduled meetings. The second year, she'd started noticing patterns, gaps in the market, opportunities Victor was too busy to see. By year 3, she was the one doing the real work while he took the credit. She'd negotiated the Cape Town expansion deal while Victor was on vacation. She'd saved the Nairobi partnership when their main contact got cold feet, flying out on her own weekend to smooth things over face-to-face. She'd built relationships with venture capital firms across 3 continents, all in Victor's name, all while being paid a fraction of what she was worth. But she'd stayed, because she believed in the vision, because she thought loyalty meant something, because Victor kept saying, "Next year, Lily. Next year you'll get that promotion." Next year never came. Instead, Victor's brother died. Heart attack at 49, leaving behind a daughter named Jessica who'd spent her 20s bouncing between yoga retreats and failed pyramid schemes. Victor had cried at the funeral, his shoulders shaking as he promised his brother's memory that he'd take care of Jessica, that he'd give her purpose, that family came first. 2 weeks later, he'd called Lily into his office. She'd walked in thinking it was about the Singapore investors she'd been courting for months. They were close to committing, she could feel it. Instead, Victor couldn't even look at her when he said it. "We're restructuring. Jessica needs a fresh start, and I think she'd be perfect as my new executive assistant. Before you keep watching, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. I love knowing this story is reaching people everywhere. And if you're feeling this already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Now let's get back to it." Lily had felt the floor drop out from under her. "What about me?" "We'll find you something in operations. Same salary, just a different role." "Operations." Her voice had come out flat, hollow. "Victor, I've been running half this company. The Lagos office exists because of me. The Morocco deal happened because I flew out there when you were stuck in meetings. I've given you 6 years. And I appreciate that, but Jessica's family, she needs this." "And I don't," the words had burst out before she could stop them. "I don't need this job. I don't need to pay rent. I don't need to matter." Victor's face had hardened then, that corporate mask sliding into place. "You're being emotional. Take the weekend. If you don't want the operations role, we can discuss a severance package." Emotional. That word had followed women like her around forever, as if caring about your own life was a weakness, as if 6 years of dedication could be erased with a single conversation because someone's unemployed niece needed a participation trophy. Lily had placed her security badge on his desk very gently, though her whole body was screaming to throw it at his head. "I don't need the weekend. I'm done." She'd walked out with her head high, made it to her car, and then completely fallen apart. What Victor didn't know, what nobody knew except for 3 people in Lagos and 2 in Johannesburg, was that Lily had been working on something massive. For 8 months, she'd been in secret talks with Titan Core Ventures, the biggest tech investment firm in Africa. They were hunting for mid-sized companies with growth potential, companies they could acquire and transform into continental giants. Hartley Tech fit perfectly. Lily had built the entire pitch herself. Nights and weekends, while Victor took credit for her daytime work, she'd been crafting spreadsheets, growth projections, market analyses. She'd flown to Lagos 4 times on her own money, meeting with Titan Core's acquisition team in hotel conference rooms, answering their questions, proving that Hartley Tech wasn't just another small player. It was a sleeping giant. And they'd believed her, because Lily Torres didn't just talk about potential, she showed receipts. 3 weeks before Victor fired her, Titan Core had verbally committed $40 billion, not an investment, a full acquisition. They wanted to buy Hartley Tech and make it the cornerstone of their Pan-African expansion. It would have made Victor one of the richest men in the region. It would have secured every employee's future. It would have been his legacy. Lily had been waiting for the final contracts to be drawn up before telling him. She'd wanted to walk into his office and hand him the deal of the century, perfectly wrapped with a bow. She'd imagined his face, the shock, the gratitude, maybe finally the respect she'd earned 1,000 times over. Instead, he'd handed her a pink slip and a pat on the head. So she'd left, and when Titan Core called her 3 days later to finalize details, she told them the truth. "I'm no longer with Hartley Tech. The owner and I had a disagreement about my value, but I know other companies that would be a better fit." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, "Tell us more." Lily had spent 6 years studying the African tech landscape. She knew every player, every strength, every weakness, and she knew exactly which company deserved this opportunity more than Victor ever would. Atlas Digital, run by a woman named Ruth Kimani out of Nairobi, Kenya. Brilliant, ethical, the kind of leader who remembered her employees' children's names. Atlas was smaller than Hartley Tech, but more efficient, more innovative, more human. Ruth treated her team like partners, not servants. Lily made the introduction. Within 2 weeks, Titan Core and Atlas Digital were in serious talks. Within 6 weeks, contracts were being drafted. Within 3 months, the deal was done. $40 billion, the largest tech acquisition in African history. And Lily Torres wasn't some assistant's name buried in the credits. She was the lead consultant, the architect, the woman who'd made it all possible. Meanwhile, Jessica started at Hartley Tech on a Monday morning wearing a blazer that still had the price tag tucked inside the sleeve. She was sweet, genuinely sweet, but completely drowning. She didn't know the software. She didn't understand the client relationships. She scheduled a meeting with Tokyo investors at 3 a.m. their time and didn't realize the mistake until they sent a very confused email. Victor told himself it was growing pains. Jessica would learn. Family was worth the investment. But by week 4, the cracks were showing everywhere. A contract renewal got missed because Jessica forgot to add it to the calendar. The Singapore investors, the ones Lily had been carefully nurturing, pulled out after Jessica accidentally forwarded them an internal email complaining about their negotiation style. The Cape Town office called asking why nobody had responded to their urgent requests in 2 weeks. Victor started staying late every night, cleaning up mistakes, putting out fires, realizing with growing horror that his company had been running on one person's competence, and he just fired her. He thought about calling Lily. His hand hovered over her contact in his phone a dozen times, but his pride was a wall he couldn't climb over, and besides, she'd probably moved on, found something better, forgotten all about Hartley Tech. He had no idea. The news broke on a Wednesday morning. Victor was in his office trying to explain to Jessica why you can't just reply, all to a company-wide email with "lol okay," when his phone started buzzing. News alerts, one after another. TITANCORE, VENTURES announces, record $40 billion acquisition of Atlas Digital. Kenyan tech firm BEC, MES Continental Powerhouse in historic deal. Lead consultant Lily Torres, praised as mastermind behind Africa's biggest tech merger. Victor's coffee cup slipped from his hand. It shattered on his desk, hot liquid spreading across papers, but he didn't even notice. He was staring at his phone, at Lily's face on his screen, professional photo, confident smile. The article called her a visionary, a connector, the woman who'd seen potential where others saw obstacles. And then, buried in the fourth paragraph, the sentence that stopped his heart. Torres had initially been in discussions to broker a similar deal for her former employer, Hartley Tech Solutions, but left the company following a management dispute 3 months prior. The phone slipped from his hands. She'd had this deal, for him, for his company, $40 billion, and he'd fired her for his niece. Jessica poked her head in. "Uncle Victor, are you okay? You look really pale." He couldn't answer. His throat had closed up. His chest felt like someone was standing on it. She'd been building this the whole time. While he took her for granted, while he treated her like furniture, while he prepared to throw her away, she'd been constructing the deal of the century. For him. And he'd chosen blood over brilliance. Victor spent that entire day reading every article, watching every interview. Lily was everywhere. Poised, articulate, gracious. A reporter asked if she had regrets about leaving Hartley Tech. She'd smiled, that same professional smile, and said, "Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is show you that you were never valued. It forces you to find people who will." The knife twisted deeper. His investors called. They'd seen the news. They wanted to know why Hartley Tech wasn't in those headlines, why their company had missed the opportunity of a lifetime. Victor stumbled through excuses that sounded hollow even to his own ears. Timing, strategic differences, miscommunication. Nobody believed him. Within 3 weeks, 2 major investors pulled out. The company's valuation dropped. Clients started asking uncomfortable questions. Word spread in the industry. Hartley Tech had fumbled the biggest deal in African history because the boss didn't recognize his own best asset. Jessica knew something was wrong. The office felt different now, tense and brittle. People stopped making eye contact with her. She heard whispers in the break room that cut off when she walked in. She tried to ask Victor what was happening, but he'd become a ghost of himself, hollow-eyed and distant. One Friday afternoon, she found him in his office, staring at his computer screen. She knocked softly. "Uncle Victor." He didn't respond. "I know I'm not doing a good job," she said quietly. "I know everyone here wishes Lily was still around. I heard them talking. They say she was the one who really ran things. They say you made a mistake letting her go." Victor finally looked up. His eyes were red. "They're right." Jessica's face crumpled. "Then why did you hire me?" "Because I loved my brother. And when he died, I thought I could honor him by taking care of you. I thought family was what mattered most. More than being fair." The question hung in the air like smoke. Victor had no answer. Jessica left 3 months later. She knew she was in over her head, knew she was a constant reminder of Victor's biggest mistake. He gave her a generous severance and wrote her a glowing recommendation letter for graduate school. She hugged him goodbye and whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't her." "It wasn't your fault," Victor said, and he meant it. This was his failure, his blindness, his pride. Hartley Tech limped along for another year before Victor sold it at a fraction of its potential value. The new owners gutted the leadership team. Victor walked away with enough money to retire comfortably, but it tasted like ash in his mouth. He'd had everything, and he'd destroyed it by choosing comfort over courage, familiarity over fairness. Lily, meanwhile, had become a legend. She'd started her own consulting firm, Tor's Strategic Solutions, specializing in African tech mergers and acquisitions. Companies fought for her attention. She was invited to speak at international conferences. She was profiled in magazines as one of the most influential women in African business. She bought her mother a house. She hired 3 junior consultants and paid them double the market rate because she remembered what it felt like to be undervalued. She built the career she'd always deserved, and she did it on her own terms. 5 years after Victor fired her, they ended up at the same conference in Accra, Ghana. It was a panel about leadership and talent recognition. Victor was in the audience, a nobody now, just another face in the crowd. Lily was on stage, speaking about the importance of seeing people for who they really are, not just the roles they occupy. "I once worked for someone who couldn't tell the difference between my job title and my value," she said to the audience. "He thought because I answered his phones and managed his calendar, that was all I was capable of. He never asked what else I could do, never wondered what I was working on, never saw me as anything more than a pair of hands that typed his emails." Victor sank lower in his seat. And when he needed to make room for someone else, someone connected to him by blood instead of merit, I was the easiest person to cut. Because in his mind, I was replaceable. Assistants are always replaceable, right? The audience murmured, some nodded. But here's what he didn't know. While I was working for him, I was also building the biggest deal of his career. A deal that would have transformed his company, secured his legacy, made him one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the region. And I never told him because I wanted it to be perfect first. I wanted to hand him success wrapped in a bow. Victor's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Instead, he fired me, and that deal, I took it somewhere else, to a leader who valued her people, to a company that deserved it. The room erupted in applause. After the panel ended, Victor waited outside the conference hall. He didn't know what he was going to say. Sorry seemed too small. Congratulations seemed insulting. He just needed her to know he understood now, that he saw his mistake, that he'd give anything to go back. Lily walked out surrounded by people, admirers asking questions, handing her business cards. She was laughing at something someone said when her eyes landed on Victor. The laughter stopped. The crowd seemed to sense the shift and gave them space. They stood there, 10 feet apart, 5 years of consequences hanging between them. "Lily," Victor said, his voice cracked, "I need to tell you that you're sorry." She tilted her head. "That you made a mistake, that you didn't mean to destroy your own company by underestimating me." He nodded, throat too tight to speak. Lily took a step closer. Her eyes weren't angry. They were just tired. "Victor, I don't need your apology. I needed your respect when I was working for you. I needed you to see me as more than just your assistant. I needed you to ask what I was working on, to care about my ideas, to treat me like a human being instead of office furniture. I know that now. Now doesn't help me. Now is too late. Now is for you, not for me." She paused. "But I hope it helps the next person. I hope you learn that people aren't disposable, that loyalty deserves loyalty, that blood doesn't make you family, actions do." Victor's eyes filled with tears. "You were the best thing about my company. I was just too blind to see it." "You're right, you were." Lily's voice softened just slightly. "But I'm not angry anymore, Victor. I'm grateful. Because if you hadn't fired me, I'd still be working for someone who didn't see my worth. I'd still be making you successful while staying invisible. You set me free. You just don't get to feel good about it." She walked away then, back to her life, her success, her future. Victor stood there watching her go, understanding finally what it meant to lose something precious because you were too foolish to hold on tight. He never fully recovered. The guilt followed him like a shadow. He'd wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes, replaying that day in his office, wishing he could reach back through time and shake himself, scream at himself to stop, to think, to see. But time doesn't bend, mistakes don't erase, and some chances once lost never come back. Years later, when people asked Victor about his biggest regret, he always told the same story. About the brilliant woman he took for granted, about choosing blood over merit, about the $40 billion deal that should have been his legacy but became his greatest shame. And when people asked Lily about her biggest breakthrough, she smiled and said, "The day someone told me I wasn't valuable enough, because I finally stopped believing them." She'd built an empire from the ashes of someone else's blindness. She'd proven that your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it, but by what you do when they don't. And somewhere in a small apartment in Johannesburg, a young woman working late nights as someone's undervalued assistant read Lily's story and decided she'd had enough too. She'd been building something in secret. She'd been waiting for the perfect moment. That moment was now. Because Lily Tors had taught her the most important lesson. When someone shows you they don't value you, believe them. And then go build something so successful they'll spend the rest of their lives knowing exactly what they lost. That's the story. One man's blindness, one woman's brilliance, and the reminder that the people you overlook today might be the ones writing history tomorrow, just without you in it. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone you've underestimated or someone who underestimated you, I need you to do something. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because we tell real stories about real consequences and real redemption. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone grinding in silence, someone waiting for their moment, someone who's been told they're not enough. And drop a comment telling me, do you think Victor deserved forgiveness? Could he have fixed this? Or was it already over the moment he chose comfort over courage? I'll see you in the next story.